right, guys, welcome to the Cooperrider podcast. Andrew Cooperrider, your host, of course, and I am here today to bring you all the news that's at least important, some of the stuff other people don't cover here in Kentucky, and I've got a couple of great subjects for you guys today. We've got some more election news, some more election challenges going on, some other lawsuits being filed, one in Campbell County for first district commissioner. We've got a couple recount requests around the state that I'm aware of, and if I don't cover one, I'm sorry. Savannah Maddox has a big announcement, so we'll be interested to talk about that. Gas prices, of course, are up there, but a lot of people don't understand how our state is profiting off of it and how our legislators could have done something this last session to help us out with it, but failed to because, well, quite frankly, they probably did want the state to go ahead and solve its fiscal problems off of our backs, as usual, per the government. And then finally, we've got the Herald Leader big Sunday front page article pushing gun laws. And we'll talk about that article and talk about gun laws in general across the state. So I thank you guys for joining me. And we will go ahead and start off here in just a second. But while we are waiting, remember, you can text Liberty to 33777. Text the word Liberty to 33777 to get our calls to actions, to get your updates about the show, about what's going on with us, and just in general in the fight around the state. So text the word Liberty to 33777. Those watching live, you can see it as a ticker there at the bottom. Those listening on a podcast form, well, you just had to hear my voice. Also, as well, if you could like, comment, and share. So feel free to share this video out everywhere you can. If you're watching on Facebook, hit the share button. On YouTube, send the link to some people. And then also to comment and like the videos. That helps the reach. So make sure you're commenting and liking as far as that goes. And then we will start digging into it here. So like, comment, share, support. Thanks, guys. Okay, so we've got some more election issues. So last week, I talked about just some general rule following that went on in my election, and then also some issues kind of going around the state. Well, it has expanded and continued. And we'll start off here with the Painter v. Fishner District 1 Commissioner race in Campbell County. Now, a lot of people probably haven't heard about this. It's not commonly being shown here. But we've got incumbent Brian Painter. He's the District 1 commissioner. And then Dave Fisher, which is the vice chair of the Campbell County Republican Party. Worth talking about here a little bit. And there's an issue going on. So what's going on? Well, what happened was, so Fisher files a lawsuit to first put an emergency injunction on the certification of the Painter being certified as the nominee for the Republican Party and issuing a challenge. And what it's mainly based upon is some campaign electioneering violations. So Painter defeated Fisher. So the incumbent defeated Fisher by 106 votes in the GOP primary on May 17th. However, he filed a case that talks about how poll workers who were attending the election training, so special election training, so training to the poll workers to teach them how to behave and how to act on election day in Campbell County. This was reportedly held at the county clerk's office, being held there for the training, and that's important as we go into it. But they were subjected to the presence of campaign materials from Painter, from the Campbell County Judge Executive Steve and Jailer James Daly, all of whom won their primary elections on May 17th. Painter also alleges he passed out pins to the 158 poll workers. Okay, so this is important. So he only won by 106 votes. And the day of the election, you have or the day of this training, you have 158 poll workers training inside the county clerk's office, and that were handed pins and stuff and election material and as such. Now, obviously, 158 is more than 106. So there is some issues. There are also two poll workers typically are very active voters. People talk to them. If you know who poll workers are, typically they're very active politically. And so if a good chunk of them could have easily, because of that electioneering, told others about it. But he said, well, why couldn't the challenger here, Fisher, have also come in and handed out some materials and things like that? Well, the case alleges it's illegal, and it was lodged. And so when this actually happened during the training, there was a complaint logged with the county clerk via email, who responded with and with saying that, hey, they can't be doing that. They can't be handing out electioneering material at this poll worker training. And they respond with, well, any candidate is allowed to pass out literature at the poll worker classes. This has been the practice for decades. Well, here's the issue. And the issue is does the county clerk aware of what the actual law is? We saw it here in Fayette County, and we've seen a lot of these county clerks are completely unaware of what the law actually states. And in this case, we do have an interesting laws on it that is going to need to be covered. And that's KRS 117235, which I'll show to you guys here. So this is the law that I believe they're referencing. And I'll be full disclosure, I haven't read the full and complete complaint. But obviously, if you know from my day of where we did our own restraining order on the clerk there, clearly we do know our election law a little bit better than the county clerk of Fayette County does. And so here's the law here. It says no person shall electioneer within the interior of a building or affix any election materials to the exterior or interior of a building where the county clerk office is located, comma, or any building designated by the county board of elections and approved by the state board of elections for absentee voting. During the hours of absentee voting is being conducted in the building by the county clerk. Okay, so there's two ways to interpret this law. And this is the problem with laws. Sometimes they're wrote kind of interesting ways. So when we talk about, hey, we need to adjust something going on with the law, that's what we're talking about. So now you could read this to mean, and this is how I'd read this, that at no point can you electioneer in the county clerk's office, not just during election time, but ever, right? You cannot campaign in the county clerk's office. That makes a lot of sense. People show up there all the time to conduct official election business, whether that's to register to vote or cast or absentee ballots, pick up ballots. Early excuse in-person voting was going on early on too as well. So it makes sense to me, based upon how our election laws are, that the county clerk's office are not allowed to electioneer in. And also any other buildings that have voting going on. Anytime. So if the county clerk designates an area to be voting, that becomes an area where you can't electioneer. But at all times, you cannot electioneer inside the county clerk's office. That's how I read the law. I believe that is the way that they are looking at it in this lawsuit. And so it's certainly, as we dig into it in there, he's got a case. Now, of course, the county clerk's defense of, well, we've just done it this way for decades. It doesn't matter what you've done for decades. It doesn't. It matters what the law is. And just because you've been allowing people to break it doesn't mean it can continue to happen. And just because you think, well, I think this is where the law is. This is what, like I said, this is what we ran into the Fayette County clerk. The law is the law. There's case law to it. There is interpretation to it that's already been there. It is not up for debate by the county clerk. But yet these county clerks continue to think, it's what I think. Oh, I feel like this is the right thing. I've just been doing it this way forever. Nobody's ever challenged it. Well, just because everybody's in on the law breaking doesn't mean it's right. And we see this all the time, even in our own law. And I talked about this last week, where I was talking about how, by all measures, our early voting, our 3 days of early voting, no matter how much you may like it, is not constitutional. And they've had to invent up terms to make it constitutional. I talked about this last week. Go back to my last week podcast if you don't know what I'm talking about. And we do this thing, not we, sorry, I'm not doing it, but they all the time, our government does this thing where everybody just is in on it, and nobody's fulfilling the roles they have to. So it's up for a citizen to come in and say, look, you have to enforce these things regardless of if everybody's just okay with it. And it's all about creating a very even playing field too as well, because Obviously, the judge executive, that's his office. He knows what's going on there. Or in this case, the commissioner, they know what's going on. They're the current commissioner. They hear about these trainings going on. Maybe the other candidate doesn't know about the trainings because it's not exactly publicly posted. They reach out to you. And so, it's, and also too, that is, look, they're showing up to train, to handle themselves at the poll, not to be campaigned to, and that is tax dollars being paid for at that moment in time, and to use it as an opportunity, a forced gathering of 158 guaranteed voters. Poll workers all vote like 100%. So 158 guaranteed voters, certainly is important as far as that goes. And so I think it's really, really important. And as we dig into it, and as this progresses, I'm interested to watch what happens, because I'm interested to see how this case turns out. I'm very fascinated to see how it turns out, because it's just interesting, and it goes proof point. And you know what? I don't know anything about Painter or Fisher. I'm not from the area. I'm not from Campbell County, and this is a very local race. So it's, in a way, it's something that I don't know exactly who's a good person, who's a bad person, or anything like that. And I'm sure they're both very good people. But I'm glad Fisher is seeing and forcing the county clerk to at least look at the law and understand what's going on with it, because there's too many, like I said just a few minutes ago, too many of these county clerks, too many people. They're playing it real fast and loose with voting laws without actually bothering to figure out what's going on. Additionally, as well, in other election news around the state, we've got recounts being filed by Jacob Clark and Bridget Elley. Now, Bridget Elley had a much larger, she's running against David Osborne, House Speaker. She had a much larger margin. I do not believe Bridget is doing it where she necessarily thinks that she's going to make up the difference. I believe, if I am not mistaken, and Bridget, if I get this wrong, I apologize, but I believe that she is doing it because she wants people just to feel more secure in the election. Maybe there's some people in her area that think maybe there's cheating going on or what have you. And so by doing a little recount audit can help people feel more secure in their elections, which is a fine thing to do. Jacob Clark, that's a lot closer of election. I believe he took like 46% of the vote, 45%. I could be way wrong. But I believe Jacob Clark took 45, 46%. He's running against Samara Heavren. And, that's obviously closer. I don't know if the belief is a recount or a recanvass. Because remember, too, so if you lose by, let's say, 500 votes, that's only actually 250 votes, 250 voters that had to have been miscounted somehow. And that's not a giant amount per se, because, if you take one out of one column and move it to the other, it actually shrinks the margin by 2. But I'm interested to see what Jacob Clark is that comes out there. I don't know if he thinks it'll change the outcome per se, or if he's also about just kind of making sure it's a secure election. But I think it's important too to talk about the culture that goes around these things. I can tell you, while I was running, many reporters asked if, when the election came out, if I was going to challenge it. They're asking before, like, I'm talking weeks before the election. Well, are you just going to accept the results, or are you going to challenge it? Because of the whole Donald Trump thing and voting and the issues there, which I think there was issues there that we should be able, and this goes into the culture here, this double standard, because, when Democrats have an issue about an election or want to do an investigation on an election, it's fine. It's okay. It's cool. The media is fine with it. Hey, it's worth doing. But when Republicans now do it, even other Republicans attack you for it because you're casting doubt on the outcome. And it's like, no, it's good to audit elections. It should be. But even when I was running, before it came out, they were like, well, can you commit to accepting the results, not challenging them? I was like, I don't know. What do you ask? What if it's a 6-vote difference? It'd be stupid of me not to ask for a recount there. Anybody should ask for a recount, but you want me to commit to that because there is a culture dealing with the recounts, a double standard. And so, while I'm interested to see how these recounts go and what the difference is, I don't know if it's enough to change the outcome. I do think we should have a culture that says it is perfectly reasonable, no matter how much you win or lose by or whatever, to audit elections. It should be perfectly reasonable to do that. But maybe as we advance forward and maybe these show something, well, maybe it doesn't change the outcome of the vote. It does show an increase of votes or significant change to the point where it becomes more and more common in the future to kind of see that occur. So, also we got Savannah Maddox has a big announcement she's making on June 6th at 6 p.m. It's the little Brighton Carriage House. That's 5307 Idlewild Road in Burlington, Kentucky, 41005. So big announcement at Little Brighton Carriage House coming up on June 6th. Excited to see what that is. It's at 6 p.m. Excited to see what that is. Of course, there's speculations. I would speculate she's probably making an announcement to run for a higher office, most likely governor. There's been a lot of chat about that, but I don't know. I just work here. Okay. I have no idea what's going on, but what I will say is try to make it out there if you can. Should be really interesting and definitely probably worth checking out. I think should be a lot of great people out there. Also, too, as well, I believe Wednesday. This next week, I could be wrong. Wednesday, this next week here, Ryan Quarles declared for governor. He's got a couple events going on. I might just check those out too. Interesting thing about Ryan Quarles there, I think is interesting, is reportedly he was told by Mitch McConnell to not run, that Daniel Cameron be the one running, and he did it anyways. That's what I'm told, which is interesting. Now, there is probably a pretty good chance, not a pretty good chance. I can't say that. I'm not going to imbue thoughts. But sometimes people do these things to make deals. There's political deals they're trying to make. Adams is talking about running for AG while he's currently Secretary of State, and he can serve another 4 years there. Either he's doing that because he wants to line up with everybody else, because, of course, in 4 years, everybody else will be running for re-election, and he's out, so he doesn't really have there. Or he's looking, or he could also be looking to make a deal. So if he stays in for another 4 years, he has an option, maybe even to run for McConnell's seat. Just some rank speculation, but it's good. I like to go to all these events. I like to hear what's going on. But make sure you put on your calendar, though, that Savannah Maddox event, June 6th, Little Carriage House. Brighton, Little Carriage House. There you go. All right. So next up here, we got why the state loves high gas prices. State just loves these high gas prices. Why? Well, let me tell you how it works. First thing you got to understand about our state gas prices, they've been crying for years about how they need more money coming in, because of course, when government's building up their budgets, they then look at it and say, you know what, we'll go with roads, when the few things that most people agree the government should be doing, like 95% of people agree government should do roads. They seem to budget that last. It's the last thing they care about. Why? Well, because, and then of course they use things like, well, that's the road fund, and that all goes into the roads. And so if we got to increase taxes in the road fund to cover more things. Well, but you're forgetting that you're taxing us so much else elsewhere. And if you want more money into the roads, before you raise those taxes, you got to cut down all these other taxes, because it all comes from the same pocketbook. And they forget that, right? But understand that they always crying about the road fund never had enough money. Now, one of the things about the road fund to make sure we're aware of is that 25 to 30% of the budget last year, I believe, at least in 2020, it was the case. 2021, I believe it was the case, went to servicing the debt. So about 25 to 30% is going right out the window to service debt. So that means if we paid off that debt without raising another dime of taxes, we should have another 30% to spend on the roads. That sounds kind of nice, right? Well, how's our gas tax calculated? So some places have set amounts. We in Kentucky, our gas tax is 9% of the average wholesale price. So that means whatever average wholesale is, it's calculated at 9% of that is what we're paying in a gas tax. It's not a set amount. So as gas prices go up, guess what goes up with it? You guessed it. The gas tax goes up with it. Now, of course, the state not wanting to, have to control their spending, put in place a floor of 24.6 cents per gallon. So no matter how low gas prices are, always about 25 cents of your gas price is going towards the road fund as a tax. However, as gas prices go up, 9% of average wholesale goes up and the gas tax amount grows. Because, of course, there is a floor, there's no ceiling. Because why would they put in a ceiling? Why would they make sure that you, the taxpayer, don't end up paying an extra high amount in tax prices? Right. And to give you an idea here, of what we are looking at for costs here in Kentucky right now that we're paying an average wholesale gas price. Okay, um, let's see here. Let's see, average wholesale gas price right now. That was year 2020. So in year 2020, it was $1.27 per gallon. That was the wholesale price. So it'd be 9% of that floor. However, at our peak high gas prices over in 2012 was $3. So that was the average wholesale price then was $3. Now, when you go and so obviously if we take 9% of 3, that's 27 cents. So that was right there. Now now that was in 2012. Okay, was $3. So if you remember, okay, how much that's gone up over the year, over how high gas prices were then and compared to where it is now, you mean rest assured we are well above that floor of 24.6 cents. We're sitting probably, I would guess, somewhere around 35 to 40-ish cents a gallon would be my guess. I would guess we're sitting right around 35 cents a gallon. Just based upon, I'm just comparing old prices and everything else, highest prices in 40 years. And I'm making an educated estimate here. So let's say it's 35 cents, right? Well more than they budgeted for. Trust me, because they've been trying to change this formula up because the low gas prices during Trump's presidency meant that they were like, well, cost of things cost of things weren't really going up either, but inflation was going up, but our gas prices aren't raising. So we need to edit it. We need to change it. And look, I understand where they're coming from. But they got to remember they tax us so much elsewhere. But of course, we don't have a ceiling. No ceiling. So of course, while we're suffering, they're profiting. Now, I hope at least, and look, the state legislators knew this. It's not like, remember when they were in session? It's not like our gas prices were low. They knew the price would keep raising and they knew they would be profiting off of it. They just didn't care about our suffering. They don't actually care that you are suffering from the highest gas prices ever. They don't care. Okay. They want their VIG. They want their tax. And you hope at least if they're going to be fiscally conservative, then we're going to make sure that that money is directed. And of course, I didn't really see this in the budgets, and I didn't see any legislation on this. I could be mistaken, but directing to the road fund to pay off their debt, pay off that 25 to 30% of the budget that goes to debt, pay that off. So that way, on the other end of this, at least, you don't need to cry about needing to raise our gas tax in another year or 2 or 3 when a Republican finally takes over the presidency and the gas prices get lower. Or, God forbid that we win Congress and Senate, and then the Republicans do something like pass laws to remove policy procedure being in the power of the president by so much. I mean, I was talking about, I'm going off on a tangent, but I'm going to go off on this tangent. I was talking about this the other day about how, look, Democrats are like a puppy. And when you lock a puppy in a room and don't let them out or any whatever, they're going to go on the floor. So whose fault is it that you locked the puppy in the room for it to go on the floor? Is it yours for locking the puppy, or is it the puppy? Now, I'm not advocating, I'm not saying Democrats they know what they're doing. They're more evil than a puppy. Trust me. But we as Republicans know what they're going to do. I mean, Biden is just continuing the energy policy of Obama, and Republicans, when they're in control for whatever reason, they decide they're going to make laws as if Republicans will be forever in control, and they're not going to make laws to ensure that it's not the case. Because right now, imagine this, okay? If while Republicans had control of the House, the Senate, and the presidency, they enshrined the energy policies that were keeping our gas prices so low that are being executed out of the presidential office into actual law. Now you can be like, well, how do they have the foresight to do this? Trust me, they know what they're going to do. And the cynic in me believes that they do this on purpose because they want us to suffer under Democrats so we reelect them. And while I think politically that is tactful, I think morally it is incredibly corrupt to use the suffering of people to give yourself power. I think that's wrong. I think Democrats do it too, of course. And so we didn't enshrine these energy policies into law. Instead, we've left them up to this all-powerful president, and I've said it time and time again, electing one person to a better office is not a long-term political solution for this country. It's not. Because we have too much oscillation. And especially as divide becomes greater, we're going to be oscillating between one extreme and another. And it means our markets are going to be volatile. It means your life's going to be volatile. And until we normalize things by getting the government out of our lives and passing legislation that does it, so that way it's not super, super easy to get rid of things. Instead, it becomes difficult, becomes harder. And the people's branch, the legislature, can make those changes. Anyways, going back to this though. So, the hope is that they pay this off. However, the Frankfurt Republicans, they really seek power for the sake of power. And I think that, I don't know. I mean, I don't think they really try to pay off this debt. I think they go out and look, they probably spend money on more infrastructure, which is fine and dandy, and that's what the money's supposed to be spent on. But if I'm looking at long-term, fiscally conservative, what's best for the people over the next 10, 20 years, I'd be paying off that debt so that way we have money for roads in the future, not just this one-time thing. However, that's not the way our government typically thinks. They don't look at debt the same way we do. Yesterday, I was in Verizon. I use Verizon phones. It's not an ad for Verizon. Let me be clear. Okay, I just use Verizon for my cell phone provider. Don't sue me. So I was in Verizon, and I do a lot of obviously videos and live videos and things like that. And somebody on our staff has this really nice iPhone, and he does most of the cameras and the videoing for us because it's just so much clearer. And my phone I've had for like 3 years, and so I was looking at upgrading my phone. And I was looking at this phone, and phones are so expensive. This is like a $1,300 phone, and it was $33 a month for the next 3 years to pay off this phone. 0% APY though. And I'm like, which doesn't mean anything because for all you know, they've just jacked up the price. So the interest is in there. And I looked at my wife, I'm like, I can't do it. I know it seems so low. $33 a month doesn't sound like a lot, but I'm like, it just feels like a lot to pay for a phone on top of the service I'm already paying. And I'm trying to compare it to this other phone, and like the low class phone of that's like $15, and this phone's like $33. And I'm saying that to say we in our lives look at debt completely different than the government does. The government doesn't care about debt. The government doesn't care about what it owes down the road because it has in its mind a forever source of money. If we just need money, we just continue to pull more from our taxpayers. And if our government started looking at things fiscally the same way we do when we're talking about things, where somebody like myself is something I use every day, a phone, and I'm still hesitant about spending $30 a month extra beyond my phone bill for a nice phone, and it's something I really had to think about, and I didn't purchase that phone. I didn't purchase any phone. I walked away. I was like, I need to think about this, which I know sounds ridiculous to some people, but I'm a fiscal conservative. And if that makes more sense to what's going on, you realize why I think the way I do. But anyways, my point is government doesn't look at it the way we do. And instead of saying, look, we need to cut our finances, we need to look at how we save money, we need to not sign ourselves up for long-term debts, we need to try to pay cash for things as much as possible, the way most households seek to live their lives, so they don't, because remember, biblically, you're a slave to your debtor. So we try to be as fiscally independent as possible, but instead, they believe that, hey, we'll just continue to increase the size of the voter base. We hear Republicans talk about it all the time. We need to increase our voter base. We need to not increase taxes. We need to increase revenues by expanding our voter base. What are you talking about? And this was another conversation that I had just the other day as well about why is government obsessed with growing? You know, like whether it's the city of Lexington, the state of Kentucky, they're obsessed. We need to bring in more people. We need to grow our area. We need to do this. We need to bring in more money. Why? Because they want to do more, period. They see all the things they want to do. They don't have the money to do it. So they got to raise those funds. And so they're going to pull it off the taxpayer. And if they can't get away with raising your taxes because you'll vote them out, so they can't get done what they want to get done anyways, they're just going to go ahead and try to attract in new people so they can tax them to death until they can pull in enough people to get done all the things they want to do. Republican, Democrat, doesn't matter. If you're obsessed with growing your voter base, you're obsessed with growing government. I firmly, or not voter base, sorry, tax base. If you're obsessed with expanding your tax base, not even just raising tax, just more people paying taxes to your entity that you control, I believe you are not for a smaller government. You're for a bigger government because you want it to make more money. I think that's pretty sound logic. But obviously, there's a lot of Republicans out there, mainstream elected politicians, that hearing that will be like, whoa, is he implying I'm a big government Republican? I am a little bit. Yeah, if you're that obsessed with ensuring that the government makes more money, you're a big government Republican. And I'm sorry to say that. But anyway, so could they cut down our gas tax? Yes, they could. Sorry to go off on some tangents there, but I think it was important stuff I just covered there. But so they love those high gas prices. And of course, they're not going to take steps to take those down. All right, moving on here. So Sunday's newspaper, Herald Leader, right, had a nice little article here, front page article here, showing us this push for gun control. So here's a front page article. For those listening live, I have the picture of the front page up. And it's got from Commonwealth to crime scene, how firearms leave Kentucky become crime guns hundreds of miles away in cities like Chicago. So, of course, there's not enough call for gun control from Kentuckians for the sake of Kentuckians. So, of course, the Herald Leader wants to ensure that we fight for gun control for other states by controlling our guns here. Now, I'm going to summarize this article, okay? So they've got this front page Sunday article, basically about the premise of which front page is Kentucky is killing everyone else all around us with our gun laws. Because that just makes sense, right? It's too easy to get a gun in Kentucky. And while that doesn't lead to excise amount of death and things like that in Kentucky, maybe outside of Louisville, very deadly city right now, Louisville, goes to show higher gun laws in Louisville than other areas of Kentucky. Anyways, so while that doesn't do that, they're saying, hey, look, the Kentucky's gun control laws are causing death elsewhere. Kentucky may not, but Chicago and Illinois, all these other areas care about. And the problem is so common. It's such an issue that most of the article is about a case from March of 2021. That's right. This is such a big issue that the big write-up, the big case they need to bring to us is a year old. Now, this isn't news because it's not new. This case is a year old. Why are they talking about it now? Why is it Sunday papers front page article with big scary guns on it saying, yeah, watch out for guns and blah? Why is it? Well, simply put, because they want to scare you into doing something. They're trying to create, they're being a political activist. That's not being a reporter. That's being an activist. And that is very clear. And that's what the Herald Leader is engaging in there, because they can't find a recent case. They're talking about a case that's a year old. Your Sunday paper about a case that's a year old that's had no major movement on it recently. That sounds like an agenda, doesn't it? But you read the article, and you don't have to. I read the article, and I can tell you what it's all about. It's a story about some guys who were legally purchasing firearms in Kentucky and then illegally selling them. Let me say that again. They're legally purchasing firearms and then selling them illegally elsewhere in other states. And they're saying, well, this means Kentucky needs higher gun laws. Well, looking at these individuals, I just said they were legally purchasing firearms. That means they went in, they filled out their background check, and they were given the gun, legally sold the gun. And actually they cover this, that they were buying the guns from gun stores in like Hopkinsville and that kind of area. So it's not that they were buying guns off the street. So it's not like Kentucky just has a lot of guns on the streets and they're buying those guns and then selling. No, they were going into gun stores and legally purchasing firearms and then selling them illegally. Now, there's not a gun law out there being proposed that would stop them from doing this. In fact, these gentlemen were actually members of the military. Some of them, they were in the Army there, Fort Knox. And so these guys, by all purposes, can get a hold of guns. Like I said, no gun law anybody's offering would handle them being able to purchase it. And now then they sold it illegally. So there's no gun law you can put in place to stop them from selling them illegally, because they were already breaking the law when they were selling them illegally. It doesn't even make logical sense, but yet this deserves pages upon pages in a front page Sunday article about a year ago, some criminals breaking the law that already exists and how somehow this is a call for us to change our laws when they were already breaking them. That doesn't make much sense. And so first, I want to talk for a second to gun control proponents. Okay? First, I disagree with you. Let's make that very clear. I believe the right to own a firearm is important. I believe the right to own firearms that can even AR-15s or AR-10s are important. You don't even understand what the difference is between what I just said, and that's interesting to me. The difference between an AR-15 and AR-10 is caliber. And when people say, well, you can't use an AR-15 to hunt, actually, yes, we actually like a year or two ago, we were hunting hogs with AR-15s, but you would use something like an AR-10 to hunt deer all the time. An AR-10 is just chambered in a higher caliber. You don't use an AR-15 to hunt generally deer or something like that, because the caliber just isn't big enough. It's not a big enough bullet. AR-10s, you're starting to get into the situation where it's a deer hunting ground. But more importantly, the Second Amendment is not about hunting. It doesn't mention hunting. It's about a right to defend oneself, which means it is about owning guns to defend yourself against another human being, not a deer on a rampage like Joe Biden likes to talk about. That's not what it's about. But first, I believe that's an innate right. But let's say you don't. Let's say you think that we live in a rainbow fairyland world where if we just took away all the guns, everything would be great. Okay, well, first, there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. The right way to do it, because we have a constitutional right, is not to, once again, as I was talking about earlier at the very beginning, we can't just make, it drives me crazy when anybody, no matter what your viewpoint is, even if I agree with you, wants to do things the wrong way. If you want to change the Constitution, there's a way prescribed to do it. It's a long process, and it requires more than just a simple majority to get it done. Why? Because we don't want knee-jerk reaction laws. We want something thought through, debated. That's what our founders had in mind. I'll give you a perfect example what knee-jerk reaction laws are. There's this pool fence law here in Kentucky that was being proposed this last session and passed out of committee. What it would have done is it would have required a fence be put around a pool or pond that was on land smaller than 10 acres. Why? Because several years ago, some kid, 2-year-old, 3-year-old, ran onto somebody else's land and fell in a pool and passed away. And the parents of that child have become a big advocate for this law because they're like, hey, what has saved our kid's life? I hear you there. However, requiring every single citizen in Kentucky with less than 10 acres as a pool or pond to build a $5,000 to $10,000 fence is a knee-jerk reaction. terrible things happen. Terrible things happen. And there's a lot of different ways we can handle those situations. And instead of saying, look, we need to build a fence and cause everybody else to cost thousands upon thousands of dollars because, well, we just think that this one time, this one issue could have been prevented. That's not the way we legislate. That's not the way you do it. And so we have to legislate in a way that is logical and not emotional. And logical and not emotional. And that is what we see with a lot of these gun control laws, because they're not they're not following the proper process, and then two, they don't actually address the issues at hand. But let's go back to gun control proponents. So first, there's a right way and wrong way to do it. Okay. Second, we've got a logistical issue. Okay. Let's say you want to take away all the guns. There's 400 million guns in America. All right. Anybody can get a hold of them. Not anybody can get a hold of them. Sorry. Criminals are not going to give up their guns. Okay. What I meant by anybody can get a hold of them is there's no way you're going to be able to confiscate 400 million guns. And if somebody wants a gun, they're going to have their gun. And frankly, they're going to be able to get a hold of it. And prohibitions and bans just don't work. And if anything, on a small level, in this article from the Herald Leader, they are blaming guns. They're blaming Kentucky's laws for Chicago's deaths. That's what they're doing. Well, expand that out. They would just blame Mexico or some other country nearby that's smuggling in guns for the problems going on in our country as far as guns go, because they're comparing it to state. They compare it to the country. That's just what would happen. Right. And we saw this here. We see this with other countries around us, countries that have high gun restrictions like Canada. Blame America all the time for our gun laws causing them issues. And so you'd have to have the entire world not have guns, and only the military and the governments have guns, which sounds like the perfect recipe for tyranny, which is kind of what the Second Amendment, not kind of, that's what the Second Amendment's all about how if people can't defend themselves, it means that they're held, the government can lord over them in a way that they cannot defend themselves from. So we spend so much time, though. The logistics are there. We're even go to this. They're like, well, let's get rid of assault rifles. Okay, and what happens when pistols start being it? That's what they'll switch. Actually, right now, most mass shootings are committed with pistols. They're just not "quote unquote" school shootings. But what happens when that occurs? Well, then it'll be a call for pistols. They'll just switch to a different firearm. Or you ban assault rifles, and then people come in with mini ranchers or things like that, which I just said that. Nobody knows what gun people know what that is. It's a type of gun that functions just like an AR-15, chambered in the same rounds as an AR-15, but doesn't look as scary as an AR-15. And laws also can't keep up with technology either. I remember, California had this ban, I think it was overruled, on detachable magazines and 10 rounds. So you could buy an AR-15, but it had to have a fixed magazine, so where you store the additional rounds, and you can only hold up to 10 rounds. And so people came up with this speed loader, which you rocked into the open chamber of the AR-15. For those not gun people, don't know what I'm talking about, but bear with me. So you rock it into the open chamber, and then it had a thumb hole, and you push down real fast, and it would load down into the affixed magazine. So it was like a speed loader, 10 rounds, and then you could rock it back out. And it literally took, they timed it out. It literally took a second longer than just reloading those magazines did. And so, the point is there's no way to keep up with the technology on this. There's no way. And where there's a will, there's a way around it. And so that doesn't even make sense here. So we end up debating out things that, one, if we're going to do it right, take a long time to do with constitutional amendments. Two, logistically make no sense. No matter how you feel about guns, logistically, that just doesn't make sense. And then three, doesn't even solve the issue at hand. Most of these all these proposals I've seen don't solve things like the mass shooting that just happened down in Texas. But see, that's the issue. See, right now we see Republicans calling for things that could actually deal with the situation. Things like armed guards at schools, things like, arming the teachers, which, by the way, real quick, arming the teachers, there was this this is going to make you guys laugh. Okay, so somebody tweeted out on the Twitter a tweet stating that they about arming teachers, and somebody commented and said, "Me trying to figure out how teachers ain't gonna end up shooting brown-skinned kids for nothing. ... Though from some of the posts you've got up, I expect that would be a feature, not a bug." Now, I did not post the original post, but this is the comment. It was liked by the Sarah character. Sarah Buntrin, I believe is how you say the name. Sorry, Sarah, if I got your name wrong, but it's probably going to be the least of your worries as I'm talking about you. And so what this is this person is saying that they believe that teachers are racist. And if we arm teachers, they're just going to start shooting black and brown kids. That's what they're saying. And the Sarah Buntrin character is the JCTA PR rep with 120 strong. So JCTA is the Jefferson County Teachers Association PR. So she is PR for the teachers union in Jefferson County. And she had liked that tweet saying we can't arm teachers because they're all racist. You're supposed to represent teachers. And you're sitting here calling them all so racist they can't they can't have a firearm in their classroom because they're just going to start willy-nilly shooting minorities. What are you talking about? But of course, I guess not. According to the Louisville Teachers Union, not all cops are racist only, but apparently all teachers are also racist too, and they can't be trusted either. But I digress from that tangent to point this out. We talk about actual things that can be passed now, like putting security guards at schools, processes in place to have locked doors in place, basically just ensuring that things are protected. And instead, Democrats spend time talking about gun control, which they know they can't get passed because they're using it as an opportunity to make Republicans the problem. Even when there are kids dead on the street, Democrats would rather argue over things that don't even solve the problem and try to get their political agenda passed and try to use it so they can win the elections in November. I guarantee you right now, there are Democrats sitting all across this country, mainly in DC, in their situational rooms, talking about how they're going to use these school shootings, these shootings of kids, to blame Republicans for it so they can win elections. And listen, I know I'm talking about Democrats. I know Republicans do the same. I was talking about that earlier on gas tax, letting us suffer under Biden's energy policies so they can maintain power and bring back in power. I know they let us suffer too, but at least Republicans aren't standing on the bodies of these kids to get in place things that by all intents and purposes will not deal with 99.9% of these issues. 99.9% of these issues won't deal with them. But actual proposals that can actually get things passed, they don't want to touch. Don't want to touch. But going back to the original article, scaring people about how we need more gun control in Kentucky. Here's my concern. We have Republicans that seek power for the sake of power right now in the legislature. What do I mean by that? I mean, I don't believe most of them have some giant ideological thoughts. I think a lot of them do have a general principles they like to follow, but I think it's really, really flexible. What I mean by that is a lot of times you'll see people when they run for office, they'll have certain things they want to do or principles, but they're like, well, if I want to put them in place, I got to be in office. And so the minute they think that keeping them in office, they think, oh, well, I can't do the good, any of the principles I want to do unless I'm in office. So anything I need to compromise on, I'll compromise on so I can get into office because I can't do any good at all. Not realizing how that hurts the overall cause and as such. And also, too, that weird way of convincing yourself that you need to compromise on your principles in order to get into office. You don't necessarily need to do that. Well, you don't need to do that at all, especially if the people agree with you. And what we're seeing is people agree generally with the standpoints of those people. Don't always agree with the standpoints of the incumbents, and certainly not a lot to the point where they have to spend hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of dollars to try to keep people in office and sometimes even fail, like we saw in Northern Kentucky. But I'm concerned that if they get convinced, legislators in Kentucky get convinced that they can sneak by a primary without having to worry about being held accountable for gun legislation because The voters want to hold them accountable for it, or they believe they can spin their way out of it. And they think it makes them more attractive in a general, which they believe leads them to power for the sake of power. They want Republicans everywhere. Why? They want Republicans in all 100 House seats and all 38 Senate seats. And then even then, they won't do everything we want them to do and Republicans to do, because they'll say, well, we got to hold on to the power. And if we do something too extreme, then we'll lose the power, because we just want to be on a power, not to accomplish an overall goal, policy goals, or principles, but because we just want to be in office and we want to feel powerful. And that's what they do. And my concern is if they start to believe that they can get away with the primary and then there's general support for putting in place gun control, we might see it. So that's something we need to stay on top of, and making sure we're communicating with their legislators so they know we expect an unwavering support for our Second Amendment. Well, there we go, guys. That's most of, well, not most. That's everything I got for you guys. I covered all the topics I want to cover. Thank you guys so much. Once again, please like, comment, and share to support us. Share this podcast with people. Tell them what we got going on. As always, podcasts will be next week, Tuesday mornings in audio form on Apple and Spotify and all major places where you can listen to the audio-only podcast. And then, of course, on YouTube and Facebook, and where you can watch the video version of the podcast. Or like I said, you can also watch on Spotify. Thank you guys so much for joining me, and have a great rest of your day.